watch the behavior, watch the cadence of the buying patterns, and make sure that these people, ideally take a one-time, first-time customer and move them into one of these buying patterns. And when we notice they're not congruent with their typical behavior, as well as maybe the ratings they've been giving us, we need to step in and figure out why and save that customer, because it might be not just that customer, it might be a systemic problem.
Flourish CX, the only show helping CX leaders do one thing: empower their customers. Each episode democratizes best practices while leaving you feeling both inspired and equipped to take action. Let's get to it.
Shep Hyken is a CX expert with a resume a mile long. He's an award-winning speaker and has penned multiple best-selling books. I am Alon Wax, your host for this episode of Flourish CX, where we discuss the ins and outs of everything CX. Shep says companies need to remember one important thing when it comes to the customer experience. The internal experience is just as important as the external. As you listen, ask yourself, what kind of an experience are your employees having? Now take it one step further. How is their experience impacting your customers?
Shep, we talk a lot about people's resumes and podcasts, but I think we'll skip that today. And why don't we ask you something else that nobody knows, or maybe some people know? Who would you be if you were not this CX extraordinaire influencer and SME?
Well, I do a lot of fun things, but I would probably be a magician. Card tricks and other types of magic tricks. I've been doing that since I was 10 years old. And that's actually, I worked in comedy clubs in high school and college, and that was foundational for me being a professional speaker, which led to me becoming an influencer and well-known in this space.
So magician, I love it. So do you incorporate magician best practices into your presentations?
Depending upon the presentation, I like to have fun. And regardless of whether I do a magic trick or not, I'm still entertaining and motivating and high energy. But I do quite often incorporate a little bit of magic into the speech. It's the sugar that makes the medicine go down.
So if Julie Edwards was with us here and she would apply to you this magical skill that is magician, what would you eliminate from this world of CX? What pisses you off, or you think people are using too much and don't really understand? Or what would you change?
I'm going to give you 2 words, and then we can elaborate. And that is the wait. And what I mean by that is the distance or time it takes from when I have a problem to when the problem is resolved. And the wait I'm specifically referring to is, how long do I have to wait on hold? How long do I have to wait for a response? How long do I have to wait to get the right answer? And by the way, I just wrote about this recently, that if I don't like the answer that I'm getting from a customer service rep, not because I just dislike the answer, but because it doesn't seem to make sense, like that's just doesn't sound right, I'll just call back and talk to a different rep and oftentimes get a different answer. So I guess the wait between the time I want to get my problem resolved and actually get it resolved, due to the friction that's created by some companies that don't have the focus that they should on taking care of their customers.
The agent is not usually the problem, right? It's about the information, and even self-service is the way to get people the answer they need. Don't put it on the agent to go search in 1,000 documents, right?
Right. I believe a little bit of it does go to the agent, but only if the company doesn't hire the right person on the front line to begin with. But let's assume they do. Then the company has to give that agent, that representative, that frontline person who's really trying to keep me happy as a customer and make me want to come back, they need to give me what I need to know. And we need to make it easy for that agent to do so. So there's all kinds of knowledge banks that we can use. And by the way, if we train our agents properly, they're going to know exactly how to write the question and how to get into that knowledge base that will allow them to get the answer quickly. There's also artificial intelligence today that will allow the agent to listen in on the conversation and deliver to the agent information based on what the conversation is, so that they can be looking at a screen and deciding, what does this customer want to hear? And if they're not getting it, then they can type it in manually. But it's a great way to start getting that information to them quickly, conveniently, and easily. The other thing we need to do as a company, we need to provide the agent the tools that are easy to use. Sometimes we create great solutions for customers that become cumbersome for agents and frustrates them. And actually, it's a demotivator. Even though we say this is going to be great for the customer, it stinks for the internal people that are dealing with it. We need to focus on making it just as easy internally as we want to make it externally, because what's happening on the inside of an organization, whether it's the tools, whether it's the culture, whether it's management, the way they treat their employees, what's happening on the inside is going to be felt on the outside by the customer.
For sure. So regarding this experience, so let's dive a little bit deeper into that. But regarding experience first, do you believe this thing? I'm hearing this a lot from people that own a lot of CX and support and success teams. We got to push everything to self-service because that's the best thing, and people in day-to-day want just self-service. Is that the answer and end of all, or is it a little bit more strategy?
So one of my favorite quotes, and I actually wrote a chapter in my most recent book titled, "I'll Be Back, How to Get Customers to Come Back Again and Again." It's simple. You can't automate a relationship. Here's our research, and I do an annual research report, and we interview over 1,000 consumers and on all different areas of customer service and experience. And by the way, even if you're in B2B, your customers think like a consumer today, and they're comparing you to the best experiences they've had from anybody. But here's what we learned. 41% of customers go digital first and not the phone. However, 59% are still going to the phone. And if you break it down by demographics, age, you'll see that it's obviously an older demographic, a boomer or a Gen X, that's interested in the traditional route of support, while your Gen Zs and your millennials tend to move toward more digital support. But this is really important to understand. So depending on who your demographic is, you need to recognize they're either going to be welcome to that digital experience or they're going to be a little bit resistant. The key is to teach the customer, if you want them to use digital, the first time they call you, you should tell them, "Hey, did you know that you could have gotten this answer much quicker, easier, faster, etc. by doing this?" And if you want to go back to what I think one of the best examples ever in this is when we were told, "Hey, it's easier if you would go online and book your airline ticket rather than call the reservationist." Now, Alon, when is the last time that you took a trip where you picked up the phone and dialed and made a reservation on an airline? It's probably been years, yes?
For sure. The only time I do it is when it's over complex and super complicated that you cannot find online quickly.
And that, by the way, is the key. Sending somebody to a digital channel, self-service channel, you must give them an easy, seamless, and easy access to a live agent. And ideally, when it's seamless, they can, it's an omni-channel experience, meaning you're here working in a digital channel, you finally talk to somebody, and they say, "I can see you are making a reservation to go here." And it's like the conversation continues. It doesn't start over. The key is, if we give them a digital experience and we train them to use it, which is what the airlines did. They said, "Hey, just try it. As a matter of fact, if you try it, we'll give you 500 extra bonus miles or bonus points." And people said, "Hey, I'll give it a shot." And you know what they found? This is great. This is easy. And now today, I don't know what the numbers are, but I would say the majority, if not a huge percentage of, the airline's customers go digital first. And that's what we want to do with virtually all areas of customer experience. We want to give them, well, if it's reasonable to do so, we want to give them the option of going digital and create that solution that's easy, it's convenient, it's intuitive. And again, if there's a problem, seamlessly get them over to a live agent.
So let's dive on this intuitive word. I think it's an important one. Intuitive for us means I go online, like in Wikipedia, like looking for things like an airline ticket in our B2C world, with all of these digital natives from the Amazon, the Netflix. In B2B, this also resonates. And even in software, like we're both of us now on a podcast software, and we figured it out ourselves what to do, right? Because that's how we do things today. It should be easy. So is this push to digital first experiences something that needs to be thoughtful just by the owner of CX? Or is it product? Or is it customer success? Is it marketing? Or is it everybody that needs to think about this customer experience? Is CX a team sport, or should it have only one owner?
Yeah. So, let's separate the digital experience from this. I have been preaching for years, and it started out where customer service is not a department, it's a philosophy. And I'll say that's the same for customer experience as well. Yes, it's tactical at times, it's strategic at times. There's people up at the top making decisions on how we're going to drive this customer experience strategy. But at the end of the day, everybody in an organization is somehow impacting the customer experience. The key is to let them know where they fall into that. And I'll give you an example. Let's use the airlines again. You're in New York and I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. It's a 2-hour flight. And if I am flying to visit you, I'm going to check my bags. And 2 hours later, I'm going to get to New York. I'm going to go to the baggage carousel and there's my bag. There's probably 10, 12 people that touched my bag from the time I saw it go down the conveyor belt to when I saw it show up on the carousel. None of them ever saw me. They never saw the customer's smiling face. But if they failed, would have negatively impacted my experience. And we've got to show them that, hey, this is what happens. And by the way, the person that failed to put my baggage on the right plane actually failed two customers. Me as an outside customer who now has to go to the baggage office and talk to the other customer, an internal customer of that person who works for the airline because they failed. And now that internal customer, that poor soul that stands behind the counter at the baggage claim office has to listen to people like me complain, you lost my luggage. I mean, Alon, when was the last time we walked into a baggage claim office just to say, hey, you guys are doing a great job? It doesn't happen. We only go there because there's problems. But the point is that that person who works at the airline who never sees the passenger has great impact on the experience for both internal customers as well as external customers. So I'll argue you can give me an org chart for a company that has 50,000 employees. Pay me enough money and give me enough time. I'm going to show you how every one of them at some point impacts somebody's experience either internally or externally. And we need to train people on how to deal and understand what the experience is. You train somebody differently depending upon their role. Somebody on the front line, you're going to train them more for typical customer service experiences, where somebody internally, they may be learning about internal service, but they're also going to learn about the overarching philosophy of the customer experience. So people get trained differently, but they all get trained and they understand where they fall into this important role.
We quoted Julie Andrews prior, but now I'll quote Seinfeld, who's also one of my favorites, which is anybody can just take a reservation, but you got to keep the reservation, right?
I am writing an article where I'm trying to find my 10 favorite video clips and that's one of them. I just think that's one of the funniest examples of botched customer experience. And you know what it is? It's all about keeping your commitment to the customer, because as soon as you let them down one time, in the rental car agency, there's, you've got Hertz and Avis and Enterprise and National and Alamo, and there's probably 8, 10 different places you can go. You know what? Don't give people a reason to want to go somewhere else.
That's exactly right. And you know what? It's everywhere. Any product, any solution. The moment that you identify somebody already upset or at risk of churn, that's probably too late. And this goes to, how do we understand a little bit about how to have leading indicators, not lagging, leading indicators about experience and customer health? What are the things you would recommend, are the things to look at? Or the big question is there one metric to rule them all?
So I believe metrics are very important. Net promoter score, customer effort score, customer satisfaction, CSAT, and 100 other metrics that you can look at. They're all important, but what they are, and this is real, is to understand is they're a history lesson. And I love history. History will repeat itself. We can learn from history. We can learn to change things to make it better. We can learn to continue to do things that are right. So that history lesson is extremely important. So don't think for a moment what I'm about to share with you means it's not, okay? So we have to have those metrics. The metric that I think is really important that many companies are missing is the behavioral metric. And that is looking at a customer's behavior. Do net promoter score on a scale of 0 to 10. What's the likelihood that you'd recommend us? And the answer might be a 10. So my question is, okay, that means they like this enough to recommend us. Did they recommend us to anybody? Can our salesperson, especially in the B2B environment, call the customer up and say, hey, I noticed you gave us a 10 that you'd recommend us. Can you give me the names and phone numbers of the people that you would recommend us? I mean, that's just so obvious. And if they go, well, you know, I don't know, I'm a little uncomfortable with that, it means you really didn't do the job. It's the same thing with somebody saying, you know, what's the likelihood that you'll come back and do business with us again? And if they say, oh, a 10, but they don't come back, the behavior didn't match up with the result of the survey. So we want to look at behavior. And where this came about is when I was talking to an executive, as I was getting ready to prepare for a speech for 1,000 business owners and managers of hair salons of all places. Can you imagine they hired me, the bald guy, to talk to people about haircuts? But what we wanted to talk about was, you know, what's going to drive the experience that would make people want to come back. And he said, we measure all of the things I just mentioned, but we really want to measure behavior. Because what he said is certain customers exhibit certain behaviors. For example, if I had hair, maybe I would come in once a month for a haircut. So if I'm a typical customer in that genre and I'm a 12-time-a-year customer, if I start missing months, that means I've broken the behavior pattern or broken the cadence. And we need as a company to figure out why. Some people come in once a quarter. Some people come in once a week. So there's different customers that belong in different buckets. We call them personas in marketing. And we need to watch the behavior, watch the cadence of the buying patterns, and make sure that these people, ideally take a one-time, first-time customer and move them into one of these buying patterns. And when we notice they're not congruent with their typical behavior, as well as maybe the ratings they've been giving us, we need to step in and figure out why and save that customer, because it might be not just that customer, it might be a systemic problem. It might be much larger. There might be many other customers that have issues just like that one that's not coming back in that routine. So behavior is a measurement we need to look at.
Now, let's talk a bit more about this. Having a survey, which is a little bit biased, but it's in the moment. So a CSAT, 10% max.
It could be euphoric, a euphoric moment.
Yeah, you just resolved my issue that I've been shouting about for 2 months. I'm a 10, but I'm still leaving you tomorrow. Or an NPS score is, I'd like it right now. But if you're looking at behavior, especially if you have a longer sales cycle, B2B or complex product like buying a car, it's customer lifetime management is what it's called, or CDPs today and others. If you look at all the data across the person that you have, a customer, a user, a consumer, and then you also take the immediate service resolution, NPS, CSAT, or CS, you got to combine everything you can, as you're saying, behavior plus point in time to identify patterns around these people, right? So do you believe that most companies today try to aggregate all of this amazing data and come up with their own map of these patterns and personas?
Well, that's exactly what happens. But I'll share that I think the most effective companies don't look at all of this data. They look at only the most important data, because artificial intelligence and different survey mechanisms have allowed us to create this huge spreadsheet or this huge amount of data. Actually, the original definition, at least as far as I can figure out in all the research we've done of big data, is big data actually means too much data. And so we want to bring it down. And I think the smart people who are at the top making decisions recognize what the most important metrics are and focused on those. And the others may tell a story, but it's not the most important part of the story. And maybe we look at that and we consider it, but we got to focus on what's most important. You mentioned lifetime value. Well, one of the most important things we can consider, especially in the B2B world, is if you fail, and if you've got a customer that you lose, okay, when are you going to get them back? When's the next time they're going to buy? Let's take a look at, I have a company in the, I guess, automation industry, and this equipment that they sell, the way they make their money is they sell the equipment and they make a little bit of money on the equipment, but where they really make the money is the ongoing revenue from the subscription model of maintenance. They come in, they make sure it's maintained, they're watching it all the time, they give you the updates, just like any other SaaS type product, but this is based on machinery that, by the way, gets replaced every 10 to 15 years. If I fail let's assume my product is just perfect for the company, but there's 2 or 3 other manufacturers that are also good. But if I fail to keep my customer, the next time I get to come back is another generation. It's 15 years from now. It's called a generational mistake. So we don't want to blow it not only in the sales process, but we definitely don't want to blow it in the experience process along the way. Because if we can prove to them, you're hiring us not only to sell you a piece of equipment, but to manage that equipment and make sure it's working all of the time. And as I mentioned to you earlier, our customers compare us to the best experience they've had anywhere. So even if you're in the B2B world, you're getting experience compared to Amazon and Target and all these retail outlets. And case in point, I was working with a healthcare company. They had bought this $500,000 piece of X-ray imaging equipment, and they were actually building out an area within their health center, their hospital, that was going to take care of this equipment. But the equipment showed up quite early, I think over 2-3 weeks early. Now, the hospital wasn't ready. It hadn't been built out. This is what the executive told me. He goes, it's so frustrating because I wish they would have told us, because we could have probably accommodated for that early arrival. And then he goes, I ordered toilet paper from Amazon and they email to tell me it's on its way. He says, this $500,000 piece of machinery. I just thought to myself, you just compared that to toilet paper at Amazon.
But it's all about frictionless experiences, right? We have a standard expectation today that we do day to day. Humans are owners of B2B. Customers are the customers of B2B. It doesn't matter. The expectation standard has changed from 10 years ago. It's digital first, get everything at your fingertip, stop asking me questions, understand me, give me what I need. And if I don't find it, well, be there for me. And if you're changing the rules of engagement, have the courtesy to alert me.
Very well said.
So I believe that what we're both talking about is the B2B world and the B2C world, all about it's H to H, human to human at the end of the day, right?
Yep. Especially when needed. So H to H doesn't mean really person to person. It means a human has created a digital way of doing business. In other words, maybe I am a developer and I created our website to be used by another person. So it's people creating a digital experience for other people, and the other people happen to be our customers using that experience. And if at that point it's not working, we continue with the next level, which is true human to human experience.
That's right. And to go deeper into that, it's not just that the customer facing organization needs to be customer obsessed and mindful. It's the entire company, and no matter what. If I'm a person creating a technical document and I'm doing it in a 500-page PDF that is not easily consumed in the modern world, digital first, then there's a gap here. There's an experience gap between what expectations are and what reality is. Everybody and everything that touches the customer should be, first of all, please make it a bit easier. Is that something you see today, that the challenge is that not everybody thinks this way?
Convenience was what you're talking about, where you make yourself accessible. Self-service is convenience. Reducing friction is convenience. All of these things tied together. Convenience used to be a major competitive differentiator. And I believe the only reason it still is because other companies, even though they believe in it, haven't yet figured out a way to be as convenient as some of their competitors. It was a breakthrough, a competitive breakthrough. And then guess what happened? We had this pandemic. COVID-19 hit. And all of a sudden, all of these companies that hadn't really thought about being convenient were forced to be convenient. Give you a quick example. I was doing business with an auto dealership for over 20 years. And by the way, that auto dealership was very convenient to where I worked. They were less than a half a mile away. If they didn't have a car for me to use as a loaner when I brought my car in, then I could walk to work. Literally, it was that close. I looked at another dealership 10 miles away when I was driving by and saw a beautiful car in the window. And I walked in and I said, hey, I'm just looking. And the guy says, well, are you thinking about buying? I go, yeah, but you're 10 miles from where I live. And he said, you know what we do? We're different than most dealerships. We will bring the car to you and we will let you test drive it. The only reason you come in here is to buy a new car, but you don't even have to do that, because if you just talk to the salesman, tell us what you want. We'll come out and bring a car. Whenever you need service, we'll bring you a loaner, pick up your car and drop your car off when it's done. You never come in. I go, wow, that's convenient. And then they were competitively priced on top of it. Guess what? They won my business. Well, what happened in the pandemic is all the dealerships realized if we don't take the cars to our customers can't come in because of COVID-19. And all of a sudden, convenience became the trend. Okay. Now it's just an expectation. Our customers expect it. And if you don't get it, they're going to go somewhere else to get it. So breakthrough, trend, expectation.
One more thing that we do on this show is give you some magic power, as we said, like before. Another like a fairy dust magic wand, or I don't know if you want a magic axe, sounds cooler. And you talk to a lot of executives and CEOs and founders. What are the things you think that other chief customer officer or even VP of support, of experience or success are not empowered or feel a little bit afraid sometimes to tell the CEO? What should they understand about this world of experience that they should know for somebody who knows it? Like
that one question, I just interviewed a woman, Karen Hurt, who wrote a book with gentleman David Dye called Courageous Culture. And Karen talks about how you create the culture that's comfortable sharing ideas with management and leadership, that it's more than an open door policy. It's just really comfortable. But I'll go a step further and say, we may want to say, hey, we want to hear your ideas, but you've got to give feedback as to how we're using the ideas or why we're not using the ideas. But I think even more important than all of that, and that's very important, culture is like the biggest thing, is for the leadership to really know what's going on, they need to get on the front line. Even back in the late 1980s, when I wrote my first book, Moments of Magic, I talked about Anheuser-Busch, how they took their executives and required them one time a quarter to go out in a truck with a salesperson to meet and greet the convenience store managers and owners and restaurant owners and the different grocery stores, the different places where they sold beer. And this was their way of making sure that leadership stayed in touch with their customers. And in my most recent book, I'll Be Back, I actually have a story in there about Bill Gates, who felt it was important enough for him to leave his office and go down and spend time actually answering the phones and taking support calls. There is a great story about a woman who called back and said, I was just talking to this wonderful gentleman named William, and he was so helpful. Is there any way I can talk with him again? She had no idea she was talking to Bill Gates. But that's how important it is when somebody at that level, at that size company, feel they have to get down into the trenches and get on the front line. That's the only way you're going to really understand what the customer is expecting, wanting, needing, and how they're reacting to whatever it is that you do and how you sell it.
And you don't even have to be an undercover boss for that. You just go down and take the job of the support person. We used to call it all company support. I think it's an important notion.
Yep. Some of the best companies, especially when they start out small, require everybody to take a shift or at least a couple of hours on the front line and customer support to really hear what's going on. I think it's still a great idea to do, especially with the leadership and management of a company.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Flourish CX. To learn more, head over to zoomingsoftware.com/podcast and follow along wherever you get your audio.